Hello, Blair County, and welcome to this edition of Speak Out. I will be your guest host today. My name is Julie Malone, in for Lois Kanashiki, and I would just like to take this moment to send out our thoughts and prayers to those in Fort Hood. God bless them. And with that, we have our first guest today is Art Halvorson, who's running for Congress in the 9th District, currently occupied by Congressman Bill Schuster. And welcome, Art.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you.
Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain why you're running?
Right. Well, my name, as Julie said, is Art Halvorson. I live in Bedford. A little place called Milligan's Cove is where my farm is located. My wife and I live there alone now because we're empty nesters. And we have 6 children, all of whom have graduated from college and are out working and doing professional things. I just mentioned to Julie, my youngest daughter, Tori, is a missionary in Honduras. So we're blessed to have children who are producing in this economy and building a better world. I served 29 years in the Coast Guard. I was a search and rescue helicopter pilot. Had over 4,000 hours of flying search and rescue, and as an instructor pilot and a test pilot. And served in many other capacities, of course, in my 29 years. But that was the most exciting and challenging. Ended up in Washington, D.C., where I had the opportunity to do a number of things in the federal government as a senior military officer. And so I feel like it has prepared me perfectly for what I'm attempting to do here, which is to unseat the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Mr. Schuster, and provide better, what I believe is better representation and a better voice for the people of the 9th Congressional District. And
with that, Art, you, of course, have had some issues over farm subsidies lately with some commercials from Congressman Schuster. And would you like to go ahead and address that?
Love to set the record straight. The farm subsidies came up and published to the public by Mr. Schuster in the form of what I call a cartoon commercial and some mailers. He spent, he said he budgeted $400,000 to produce this commercial, plus however much for the mailers. And so the record is this. I own 2 farms. I live on one here in Pennsylvania, and I have one in Iowa. The one in Iowa is really the one in question that I'm being called hypocrite, because I rent that farm out to a landowner or to another farmer. I'm the landowner, and I receive cash rent for that. And that cash rent is the entire amount of what I receive. So the farmer has full authority to manage that farm and produce the corn and the soybeans that he produces. So he has other farms that he operates, and he does receive subsidies, but they're not my subsidies. The incumbent has also identified my cousin, who has the same last name, who has an adjoining farm, not my farm, and I have no financial connections with him whatsoever. He also receives subsidies. And so somehow Mr. Schuster connected the 2 of them, totaled the subsidies they've received dating back all the way to 1995, and it totals close to $500,000. And he somehow has decided that that's money that I received. It makes no sense to me, but here's the positive thing about it. He put my name on everybody's kitchen table. He took us from being relatively unfamiliar to the voters to being very familiar to the voters.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so even though it's a negative ad, it's going to redound to my benefit because he's given me a lot of free advertising. We now have the opportunity to make the record straight. And factcheck.org, an independent third-party fact checker, as well as some newspapers who have researched these charges that were being made against me, have determined, and rightly so, because the truth is I didn't receive the money, and they've reported that. And so now Mr. Schuster's been forced to, hopefully out of shame, because it really was a shameful thing that he did, to take that commercial down from the television ads, take them out of people's living rooms.
So he's now officially taken them off air, correct?
As best we can tell, he has, and he's replaced it with a different ad.
Now, I checked this morning, and on his website, under his media section of his website, the commercial's still posted there.
Well, he invested a lot of money in it. I'm sure he's going to try to run it as long as he can, and people simply need to call his office and tell him, you've been caught, and you've made false accusations against Mr. Halvorson. You had to take that stuff off the public, out of the public arena.
And I understand, too, that you've posted the factcheck.org information on your website.
We did.
As well for people to check.
And it's been published in newspapers and from Philadelphia to the 9th District.
Good. And what are your thoughts now, moving to another topic in regards to Obamacare?
Right.
There's been much discussion that the president has met his numbers. I saw on Fox News this morning that the Blues have announced that really only 6 million have signed up because only 6 million have actually paid, about 15 to 20% of that 7
right.
million number. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's some fast and loose language going on. It's a political football, of course. Obamacare has been since it was first foisted on us, if you will, forced on us, certainly. And they have touted the sign-up number. You made the distinction there versus enrollment, which would include payment. And
right.
so that's a significant difference. It needs to be clarified. So I don't believe he has made his numbers. They're trying to sell this. I believe the number is $700 million have been spent trying to promote this what I consider a debacle. It's destroying our healthcare system in this country, and it will continue to do so as long as it's allowed to remain in place. Mr. Schuster, for his part, has voted to fund it as part of the continuing resolutions and budget resolutions 10 times. And without making this too political, he's saying that he voted against it 42 times, which a number of times they voted symbolically to defund it and to vote against it, but they haven't meant anything because they were just voted on by the Republican House and they never went anywhere. What went someplace was the funding, and he voted 10 times to fund it as part of those
continuing budget bills.
Resolutions. Right.
So in regards to an article that appeared in the Sunday's edition of the Altoona Mirror, for the record, you're stating that a vote for these continuing resolutions to fund the federal government is a vote for Obamacare.
Absolutely it is. In Washington, D.C., policy is determined by what gets funded. That's policy. I mean, it's equivalent. And so that's how you tell where somebody is by what they voted to fund. It's as simple as that. And I stand by my charge that he has voted 10 times to fund Obamacare, and that's exactly how I put it.
Going now to tax reform. What is your opinion on the current taxes here in this country and where we need to go?
Well, Obamacare is a tax, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court told us in a very surprise announcement dating back a couple of years ago. Taxes are pervasive. Everything is taxed. Your telephone is taxed. Your food is taxed in some cases. Your taxes for everything you do. And it's part of what I see as a creeping role in encroachment and growth of the federal government, state government, local governments. Government is getting bigger and bigger, and taxes are the means by which they're allowed to do that. We have to put a stop to that growth in government. Particularly the federal government is the area that I'm running to engage in that battle at the federal level. And so we need a fairer, flatter tax system. We need to get rid of the IRS. We need to put a system in place that begins to cut taxes and in concert with cutting the size of the government.
Very good. And in regards to another issue, currently Congressman Schuster is the chair of the Transportation Committee, right. And there's been some discussion in regards to funding and that the major transportation budget will be experiencing zero around
bankruptcy.
August. Exactly.
That's right. And
he has had some discussion on VMT.
Right.
And what are your thoughts on that recommendation?
Well, my position is since December of 2012, and it's not my position, it's what's been reported since 2012, December 2012 that I can find, and maybe before, he has come out with support for the vehicle mileage tax. I call it a tracking tax. So over almost a year and a half, he's been publicly talking about this thing. And the context for it is that the Highway Trust Fund, which is part of the purview of the chairman of the transportation, is going to go bankrupt, as you said, in July or August. That's been happening now for several years. So this is not the first time, but Mr. Schuster has allowed it to perpetuate. They spend their money in 10 months that's allotted for 12 months. Mm-hmm. So that's the context for this VMT. They have to make that up, either from General Treasury, they have to create a new tax, which is the case with the vehicle mileage tax, add tolls, do something to raise something like $10 billion. And so my position is, and there's actually a legislation on the floor introduced by Tom Graves from Georgia called the Transportation Empowerment Act, which would defederalize transportation. And here's how it would work. We collect 18.4 cents at the pump for federal fuel tax, and it's like 23 or 24 cents for diesel tax. That money is then collected by the state and the local gas dealers and sent to Washington. Well, they overspend it. It's not enough for them. They need more money. That's how they think. And Mr. Schuster has perpetuated that. So he's not the first to have bankrupted this account, but he is the current bankrupt chairman. So we've got to take that money, instead of saying to Washington, leave it here in the state of Pennsylvania. We are a donor state. We give more money to Washington for transportation than we get back. Just collect it here, collect it in all the states, and we can make it part of our, in this case, PennDOT. We don't need to send it to Washington, wait and see how much they give us back. It's a simple matter of defederalization of a fairly large component of the federal government, which I believe is unconstitutional to begin with. Mr. Schuster argues that it's constitutional because Adam Smith, who's a Scottish economist, felt like it was. Well, I'm sorry, he's not an American. He's not a founding father by any means. In fact, Madison, who wrote the Constitution, was a founding father, said that it was unconstitutional. So that's who I stand by.
Very good. And what are your thoughts on marriage, on traditional marriage? Are you supportive of that? To the death, I'm supportive of that. My wife and I have been married for 35 years. Marriage is an institution created by God, and it's between a man and a woman. It's very clear from Scripture. It's very clear from societies, from eons, from the beginning. What's being done now is significant. It signals I believe, a spiritual battle, if I can go into that, where families are being attacked, marriages are being attacked, and that's how you weaken an entire society, because it is the basic building block. It is designed to protect children. It's designed to provide fulfillment and prevent loneliness and all kinds of bad things that happen from particularly men who are allowed just to run around and take care of themselves. So I defend marriage. It's hard. It's difficult. It has to be worked on constantly. But I will always defend traditional marriage. Very good. And are you pro-life, pro-choice?
I'm decidedly pro-life. I'm an advocate. I would be a voice in Congress for pro-life issues. Did you mention Second Amendment or just
that would
pro-life
be the next
issue? Okay, all right. I didn't know if you
that would be
connected
the next
those.
topic.
But on the pro-life issue, my wife and I, whenever we've had a chance, in the last 2 years, I've been in Washington for the pro-life marches in January, and it was brutally cold. But I was there, and the numbers appeared to be down this year because of the cold. There were cancellations, reports of planes being canceled. Well, I'll tell you what, as soon as the speakers were finished, it was a small crowd around the speakers, but as soon as they were finished and the march was to begin, people in droves got off the buses because it was, below zero wind chill, so they just protected themselves for the march, began to assemble for the march, and the march, I believe, was as big as it was last year, which was, I believe, record-setting. So it's an amazing thing that's happening on the pro-life front, and I believe it's a scourge on this country, and we need to reverse Roe versus Wade.
Very good. Well, with that, we are going to take a brief commercial break here, and we'll be right back.
When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risk for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. What I would say to mothers that allow their daughters to tan, no mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery. One person an hour dies from melanoma. Jamie's hour was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, March 16th, 2007. I hope no one else has to mark their hour.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Savings Man here with a story for you about two young spenders named Tommy and Sue. Their parents let them buy whatever they chose, like video games and designer clothes. As they grew older, they spent all their pay on fancy cars, houses, 2 lattes a day. They lived in the moment, never saving a dime. When they tried to retire, they